Dickens?
Yes?
Charles Dickens?
Yes?
The Charles Dickens?
Somebody move the gentleman, sir!
Charles Dickens, you're brilliant, you are. Completely 100% brilliant. I've read them all. Great Expectations, Oliver Twist, and what's the other one? The one with the ghost?
Christmas Carol?
No, the one with the trains. The Signalman, that's it. Terrifying. The best short story ever written. You're a genius.
You want me to get rid of him, sir?
No, I think he can stay.
Honestly, Charles, can I call you Charles? I'm such a big fan.
What? Big what?
Fan. Number one fan, that's me.
How exactly are you a fan? In what way do you resemble a means of keeping oneself cool?
No, it means fanatic, devoted to. Mind you, I've got to say, that American bit in Martin Chuzzlewit, what's that about? Was that just padding or what? I mean, it's rubbish, that bit.
I thought you said you were my fan.
Oh, well, if you can't take criticism. Go on, do the death a little now, it cracks me up. No, sorry, forget about that. Come on, faster!
Who exactly is in that hearse?
My friend, she's only 19, it's my fault. She's in my care, now she's in danger.
Why are we wasting my time talking about dry old books? This is much more important.
Driver, be swift! The chase is on! Yes, sir.
Hello and welcome to Who Watches Who, a Doctor Who podcast with me, Matthew, and as always, I am joined with...
Scott.
With Scott, yep. This week we are late, and it was Scott's fault. He won't
totally.
accept responsibility for it, but I've been telling him to quit his job for years now, and he just won't do it, and so our schedule got messed up, and now it's late, all because of Scott. Nothing to do with me at all.
Not to do with you moving for a bit. Just
no. I was just waiting on Scott, and he was like, "Can't do it," and so it was his fault.
Oh yeah.
But we're here now. You're gonna get a double dose of us within quick succession because this is probably going out on Sunday evening or Monday morning. I haven't figured out which yet, so it'll be one of them. Hello to whatever day it is. Do you normally greet a day? I guess you do. This week we are looking at the Unquiet Dead, which is the third ever episode of Modern Who, and Eccleston's Christmas episode, I guess, is the closest we get to a Christmas special with Eccleston. You know, it's set at Christmas time, which having your third episode be a Christmas episode, I guess, is a fun way of, you know, showing that there's this is a time travel show.
Yeah, especially in the middle of April as well. You know, it's a time travel show. It makes perfect sense that Doctor Who would have a Christmas episode in the middle of April.
Yeah, it's very fun. This episode first aired on Saturday, the 9th of April, 2005, a staggering 17 years, 8 months, and 1 day ago. Just upsettingly long ago. I remember when this episode came out on television. I was 5 years old. It was actually like maybe the week after my 5th birthday is when this episode aired. And my birthday is March 28th, so
I don't remember this episode airing originally because I was 2 weeks. I was watching Doctor Who 2 weeks after this with World War III, so I missed this episode. But
big fan.
I do have a strong nostalgia for this episode because, like, one of the first DVDs I ever got was of the very first volume of Series 1 of Doctor Who, which had Rose, The End of the World, and this episode, and I just watched that DVD over and over and over again up until, like, the Christmas Invasion came out. I was so obsessed with that DVD, man.
Wow. Big loser dork. What a loser dork. But in other news, things that happened, the US president at the time was George W. Bush, and the UK Prime Minister was Tony Blair. I don't remember living through the Blair era at all. He's not a Prime Minister I remember being in charge, because at 5 years old, you don't give a flying fuck who is in charge of the country. The one thing of interest that actually happened on this day is a recurring theme slightly throughout. There's not a lot of things that happen on this day, but the things that do happen in this day do kind of share a theme. See if you can catch it when I start talking about it. So, the wedding of the then Prince Charles Let's say that again. The wedding of Charles, Prince of Wales, and Camilla, Duchess of Cornwall. They get married at Windsor's Guildhall in a civil ceremony on this day. Of course, now they are king and queen, and everybody kind of just gave a fucking all right, I guess. But just keep that happening in your head, okay? But while you have that in your head, try to also fill your head with movie knowledge, as you can guess. What was number 1 at the box office on this day, Scott? I'll tell you, it wasn't a film I was expecting.
Any hints? Or
It's a comic book movie.
comic book movie. 2005. 2005. V for Vendetta or League of Extraordinary Gentlemen or
League of Extraordinary Gentlemen was a very famous flop.
yeah. Oh yeah, of course. I'm just thinking of 2005. What came out in 2005? Fantastic Four. Batman Begins.
It's tied to let me make sure I've got the director right. It's tied to the Book of Boba Fett.
Book of Jon Favreau, right?
Nope.
No.
He's not the director for the Book of Boba Fett. He's not in charge of that one.
Okay. Then I don't know.
It is Sin City by Robert Rodriguez. Robert Rodriguez is the guy that was in charge of the Book of Boba Fett. Obviously, with Jon Favreau and everything still involved, but it was his show.
What a shit show.
I liked Boba Fett for the most part. There was, but I've got a soft spot for most Star Wars things. Sin City, have you ever seen it?
No, have you?
Yes, I have. It's very, very, very fucking good. It's one of those interesting movies where it's like shot for shot is the same as panel for panel from the comic. It's very, very cool, and it's heavily stylized. I don't really remember the sequel. I've seen this one maybe once or twice. I saw the sequel once, roughly around the same time, because obviously I was too young to see this film when it first came out. But Robert Rodriguez is one of my favorite directors ever, because he's possibly the most inconsistent and different director with every project he does. You know, he can go from Sin City to Spy Kids to Star Wars to Alita. Like he's all over the place.
Well, I've only really seen one of my favorite movies of his is The Faculty, and you still need to watch that. You got the Blu-ray
because you. Yes.
So I was speaking about it, and you're like, I bought this just because you were speaking about it, and you never fucking watched it, did you?
I forgot it existed, honestly, but yes, I do.
It's a really good film. It's a great film.
But yeah, I really like Robert Rodriguez. I'm always interested whenever he does something, because it's either going to be super cheesy and kind of bad, or it's going to be like really, really, really cool. You know, it's never one or the other. He helped make the B movie he did the what's it called?
Jerry Seinfeld?
Yeah, he helped make Jerry Seinfeld. No,
the B movie.
Right? No, it was. Oh my God, he did Death Proof, and what was that called? What was that series called? He teamed up with Quentin Tarantino, and they made two movies back to back.
I know exactly what you're talking
Terror,
about.
Death Proof and Planet Terror, which were Grindhouse. There we go.
Yeah, I was about to say Roadhouse.
No, they did the Grindhouse double feature, which I have on Blu-ray. Death Proof is one of my fucking favorite Tarantino movies. It is. I love films like that genre, that homage to B movies. You know, it's a soft spot for me.
You like jazz?
But anyway, turning our eye back to history, on this day in 1413, Henry V is crowned King of England at Westminster Abbey. Are you seeing a theme here?
Yes.
Then in 1483, Edward V, who was then aged 12, succeeded his father Edward IV as King of England. However, he is never crowned the king and disappears, presumed murdered, after incarceration in the Tower of London with his younger brother Richard. The princes in the tower is apparently what happens to them. So that's pretty fucking funny. Then, if we're flashing just a few years from 1483 to 2012, The Lion King becomes the highest grossing Broadway show, overtaking The Phantom of the Opera. Another thing with a king. April 9th is a king-centric day in history. You know, it's interesting. You know, these weird coincidences throughout history.
Yeah, the Lion King Broadway show. I've never seen the
It's supposed to be
Broadway
good.
show.
It's
Yeah.
Yeah, I've seen like pictures of it and like read people's opinions on it, but I've never sat down to watch the actual show. But it is supposed to be very good.
Yeah, great musical overall. Just the actual movie, though. I love that movie.
Very good movie. The Jon
The
Favreau
Jon
one,
Favreau
right? Yeah,
one?
that's the one we're talking about.
Of course. It all comes back to Jon Favreau.
He does so much. But that is all that I've got on the On This Day section, Scott. So why don't you take us into a bit of the writing part of The Unquiet Dead?
This episode was, of course, written by Mark Gatiss. Gatiss, I think.
Mark Gatiss, I think. Gatiss. I always say Gatiss. Maybe it is Gatiss. Gatiss sounds nicer. Gatiss doesn't sound nice.
I'm just going to say Gatiss. Because he's gay. Gatiss, gay.
Do you want me to keep this joke in? Do you want me to keep
gay,
this really good joke in?
He was born in 1966, and his passions as a kid was watching Doctor Who, Hammer horror films, and reading Sherlock Holmes and H.G. Wells, and collecting fossils. What a weird little kid.
Sounds like a nerd. We should beat him up.
And like one thing that you should know about Mark Gatiss is he loves the Victorian era, and he found himself captured by the languages and gloom of the era as a young child, and would love reading stories about ghosts possessing people, and he describes himself as a morbid child. Gatiss makes it his yearly tradition to read A Christmas Carol, and he even installed a Victorian laboratory in his house, which is mental.
Imagine having that much money, where you're like, yeah, I want a Victorian lab. What are you gonna do with it? Nothing. I just want a whole room.
I think he did. I think he did this in the late 90s when he didn't even have that much money, which is absolutely crazy. In a 2007 interview, he tells the story about how his collecting Victorian elements of Victorian artifacts went, and he said, I recently bought
what era were these from?
The Victorian era. What?
You've said Victorian so many times.
In a 2007 interview, he said, I recently bought a digital dictaphone, but when I got it home, I noticed there was already a 35-second recording on it. I thought, hello. So I pressed play, and all I heard was, Boxing Day morning, looking at the window, contemplating having a wank. And that was it. Obviously, whoever it was had his festive wank, decided he had no further use for his dictaphone, and then took it back to the shop. Wonderful. I immediately thought, yes, this is the dictaphone for me. Which is absolutely such a great story, I found.
That is superb. That is a superb story.
And very festive, very appropriate for this time of year.
Yeah.
His first experience obviously he's an actor as well, and his first experience acting in theatre was in 1983 when he was 17, when he was cast as Dad in The Waiting Room by Tony Stowers. He was set to be cast in Stowers' follow-up play, but his dad told him he had to focus on his exams instead. Several years went by, and he studied theatre arts at Bretton Hall College, where he met Reece Shearsmith and Steve Pemberton, and together they would create the sketch comedy group The League of Gentlemen. That's why I thought of The League of Extraordinary Gentlemen earlier.
Reece Shearsmith and the other guy, whose name I don't remember, also then go off to make Inside Number 9, which is a fantastic show. If you haven't heard of it, it's basically if Black Mirror was less consistently good, but still fun because it's only 20 minutes.
I've only seen a few episodes of that. I've only seen the live episode and that one episode that was shown to us in college, but I only saw half of it because I had to leave early. I only saw an episode and a half.
I have seen every episode. I watch the new series when they come out, and every time I'm like, it was fine. But
and Mark Gatiss actually made an appearance in one of them, didn't he?
He did.
One of the most recent ones.
He shows up in the newest season as they were on a boat together, like a swan thing, and then the story unfolds. And it was okay. The thing with it is every episode has a twist, and either the twist really lands or the twist really doesn't. You know,
I'm more of a Black Mirror guy myself, except for the American Black Mirror, which is a bit hit and miss itself. I like the old British Black Mirror. To be fair, it was only 7 episodes of the British series, but still.
I like the Netflix version of it, and I like the good old G British one that predicted Cameron fucking a pig before he did it.
The group started as a stage act in 1995 and got a radio show in 1997, got a TV show on BBC Two in 1999, and in 2005 they finished the series with a movie called The League of Gentlemen's Apocalypse. So have you seen The League of Gentlemen?
Never.
Ever?
Never seen it. Never, ever seen it.
Yeah, I only watched like one episode. It was on UK TV Gold in like 2007. It was late at night and I was up and I just watched an episode and I had no idea what the fuck was going on. It wasn't for me as a kid, but I imagine if I went back into it, I might find some enjoyment out of it.
Yeah.
Yeah, and of course, after this, Steve Pemberton and Reese Shearsmith went off to create their own shows, Cycleville and Inside Number 9, and The League of Gentlemen would reunite in 2017 for a trilogy of anniversary specials and later do a live tour in 2018 with 48 shows, which is a wild amount of shows.
That's a lot of shows, yeah, Jesus Christ.
Mark Gatiss' first professional writing work was actually in the Doctor Who world, with the 8th Doctor novel in Virgin's New Adventures range in 1992, and he would write 3 more books for his company. He wrote for his 2nd, 3rd and 7th Doctor as well. A book range I really want to get into. There's a lot of writers and story ideas are really interesting with the Virgin New media range.
Yeah, it's also appropriate that Doctor Who books are published by... You know where I'm about to say.
Yeah, you've said it before. Between 1994 and 1998, he wrote 4 direct-to-video movies starring Caroline John, who reprises her role as Liz Shaw from the Jon Pertwee era of Doctor Who. This series was called Probe.
Liz Shaw just makes me think of Tim Shaw, and that makes me sad.
Oh, God. We still need to cover a Liz Shaw episode of Doctor Who. She is an interesting companion.
Is her face covered in teeth?
Oh yeah, of course, yeah. The thing with Liz Shaw was that she was really smart, but also she still had nothing to do. Like instead of being made to go make coffee or whatever, it was like, oh yeah, go into this other room and just devise a scientific plan to defeat this, and we would not see her for like the rest of the episode.
Brilliant.
The series was called Probe, and we'd have a lot of Doctor Who actors like Louise Jameson, Jon Pertwee, Sylvester McCoy, Colin Baker, Sophie Aldred, playing different characters from the ones we played on the show. This was written for the company BBV, who could never get the rights to do major characters like the Doctor, so they would jump through a lot of legal hoops. For example, they had the rights to K9 for a while, but
who doesn't have those rights? Honestly.
But most recently, they actually lost the rights and replaced him with a robotic ferret instead. We've actually covered this at some point in one of the news episodes. I think the ferret is called BES.
Sounds better than K9. Bet he's less annoying.
Yeah, we'll probably cover more BBV in the future, but the head of the company, Bill Bagg, seems to do a lot of awful things. Oh. Like, for example, he claims he has a right to a brigadier, which he doesn't. He was given a cease and desist notice from like the estate, and he still kept on using the character, which is really scummy move. And I think he's going to get sued eventually, and that's
pretty cool.
That's
cool. Yeah, that's pretty cool behavior. Yeah.
Yeah, over the rights of a sci-fi character from like 50 years ago. Well, way to go out on.
What a hell to choose to build your entire life around.
In 1998, Gatiss would write 2 audio dramas for BBB's, the Professor and Ace series, which starred Sylvester McCoy and Sophie Aldred, kind of reprising the role of the Doctor and Ace. Obviously, this was... I think the Ace character was nicknamed Alice instead of Dorothy. Obviously, drawn from Alice in Wonderland instead of Wizard of Oz.
That's fun.
But again, in 1999, he wrote In 1999, he wrote the 2nd ever Doctor Who Big Finish audio drama, which starred the 5th Doctor, and he would go on to write an 8th Doctor drama in 2002, and he would also appear as an actor in some releases, even playing an alternative master in an Unbound story, Sympathy for the Devil. Also in 1999, BBC Two had a special Doctor Who night that began at 9 PM and would end at 12:30. Over the course of the night were several documentaries as well as an airing of the Doctor Who movie, which was the first time it aired uncut in the UK. And in between the shows were 3 comedy sketches starring David Walliams and Mark Gatiss. And David Walliams is in kind of cancelled jail right now.
Is he?
Yeah.
What's he done?
After what? Just Google David Williams, Britain's Got Talent, and you'll find out.
Right. Oh, I don't give a shit.
In 2001, Mark Gatiss created a proposal to bring back Doctor Who to air. This was 2 years before Russell attempted to revive the series himself, obviously. Mm-hmm. Mark's pitch would have had a Doctor Who appeared to be in his 60s and would keep the Edwardian flair he had in the classic series. Gatiss pitched Derek Jacobi as a possible actor who could play the role, who obviously would go on to play the Master.
Yep.
And obviously, in 2003, he was also the Master. And in the late 90s or the early 2000s, he was also an alternative Doctor. He's Derek Jacobi.
A long career in Doctor Who.
Yeah. The Doctor's companions would have been a student named Holly and a policeman named Dan. He wanted the show to be serious, and he wanted the first season to have 7 stories with 3 30-minute episodes for each story, as he felt the show needed to retain the iconic cliffhanger. Yeah. What would you feel? I don't think a 30-minute Doctor Who'd work in the modern era. 45 minutes seems more
45 minute does seem more appropriate, but it could just be that's because that's the way that we're used to it, you know? To be fair, it's a way that most TV is now.
Yeah.
You know, like, it's hard-pressed to find a dramatic show that's half an hour long. If it's half an hour long, there's comedy in it. You know,
exactly.
But... yeah, I don't know if it would work. Maybe they would I think eventually they would just start upping up the runtime. Like maybe the first season is really short, and then by the season 2, they're like, fuck it, 45 minutes is easier to write. You know?
Yeah, 45 minutes makes more sense to me because that's the length of any old drama. Where, as you said, the 30 minutes is more associated with comedies. The BBC obviously weren't interested in the pitch, and all this would make sense that Russell would want him to be one of the writers of the 2005 series. Yeah, and he would write 9 Doctor Who episodes. The Unquiet Dead, The Idiot's Lantern, The Lazarus Experiment, Victory of the Daleks, Night Terrors, Cold War, The Crimson Horror, Robot of Sherwood, Sleep No More, and The Empress of Mars. What do you think about his slate of Doctor Who episodes?
See, with Mark Gatiss, he's somebody that I always enjoy whenever it says he's written an episode, but they're never like the best episodes, you know? 'Cause like the Lazarus Experiment is shit. I remember it scaring me as a kid. You know, like I like the actual Lazarus monster is a monster that is like burned into my head because I remember it being scary as a kid. It is aged fucking horrendously, but you know, it's still whatever. But I do really like Mark Gatiss as a writer. I especially like when he teams up with Moffat. I think those two work really, really well together. That, you know, I think they work better together than what Gatiss did with RTD. But I still think that that's a fun pairing. You know, I like Gatiss. I like when he shows up and stuff because he shows up in fucking everything. Like,
yeah, he even shows up in Doctor Who. He appeared
more than once. He shows up so many times.
Like he plays the Brigadier's dad in his final ever appearance in the show, which is a big flex. But most of his episodes are pretty decent. I think he's in the same camp as like Chibnall. He wrote really decent episodes under different showrunners, and I think he could have been a good showrunner himself.
I was about to say I'd be interested to see what he would do as showrunner.
Yeah, I remember 2017. We were all like, "It's going to be Mark Gatiss or Ever Chibnall. It's going to be one of these two men." I think, and obviously went to the latter, but. Mark Gatiss obviously wants to write more Doctor Who. Actually, no, he left Doctor Who. So
yeah, he's not written Doctor Who in ages.
Yeah,
he left.
I guess
he's
kind of burned out.
Or he just knew that Chibnall wasn't going to write the Doctor Who he wanted to write. You know, maybe he'll come back with Russell's era. Or he could be the showrunner to take over once Russell leaves in like 4 or 5 years or whatever it was he said he was going to stick around for. You know?
We'll see what happens. After Doctor Who, he would act in a lot of things like Wallace and Gromit, Curse of the Were-Rabbit, Shaun of the Dead, the Dad's Army movie, Christopher Robin, The Favourite, Game of Thrones, Horrible Histories, Good Omens, and Inside Number 9. And next year he's going to be in Mission Impossible 7, which is... he's in a lot of things. You just don't recognize him, really.
Every now and then, you'll be like, oh shit, Mark Gatiss is here. But I think for the general, like, for the non-Doctor Who fans, he's just a face that you recognize.
Yeah.
Like, not many people know him by name unless you are, like, following Doctor Who quite closely. I would be very surprised. Or unless you're a big fan of the League of Gentlemen or whatever.
Yeah, like I don't recognize him if he's ever in movies. I don't really see him as him, you know what I mean? I don't really recognize him ever. Do you?
Yeah,
Have you
I
ever watched a
recognize
movie?
I recognize Mark Gatiss all the time. Always makes me laugh. I always go like, "Hey, Mark Gatiss is here. Nice."
Oh yeah, he was also in the final episode of Dracula when he was Dracula's lawyer. That was the worst role he's ever done. That was awful. And
That sounds like a good
Dracula
show.
an iPad.
Fantastic. Sounds like a good show.
Who watches Dracula when? and of course, he would also later on create Sherlock and Dracula with Stephen Moffat.
Yes.
And yeah, he was also in Sherlock as... Who was he in Sherlock again?
He was Sherlock's brother, whatever Sherlock's brother's
Okay.
called.
Bob.
Yeah, Sherlock's brother Bob. But no, he was Sherlock Holmes's brother, and he was good in it. He's good in everything. I like him. I like Mark Gatiss. He's also in The Father. He shows up. He's got a role
Does he?
in The Father.
Of course he does.
Yeah, he's in everything. That's a really good movie. Worth
Well,
watching.
busy man.
He is. He's about as busy as David Tennant with less recognition.
Yeah, so on to the Unquiet Dead. Russell T Davies wanted episode 1 to be set in the present of his series, episode 2 to be set in the future, and episode 3 to be in the past, to establish that the TARDIS can really go anywhere in time. And I think that's a good format. I think series 10 did the same thing. Series 10 had an episode set in the modern day, episode 2 was set in the future, and episode 3 was the episode we covered. Very nice.
yes,
Set
yes.
in the past.
In the Victorian era, of all eras.
And in that episode, there's a reference to this episode. It all goes in a loop. Russell and Julie Gardner really wanted to create an episode set in Wales because the show was never made in the country, which was I think they went to visit Wales a few times, but it was just a quarry in London. So, Russell's original outline was to call the episode "My Name's Dickens, Charles Dickens," and it would have Charles Dickens traveling to Wales in
That's
1960
a bad title.
for the sole purpose of debunking a fake medium who claims to have created a steam-driven ectoplasm machine that can draw ghosts out of walls. An interesting premise.
That's a fun premise.
I prefer just a story where Charles Dickens stumbles onto the supernatural rather than trying to actually find the supernatural.
It makes you don't have to reason away so many things. You don't have to you don't have to sit there and explain that Charles Dickens was this skeptic who went around busting fucking people left and right.
Yeah.
You know, you can just have him say, "Oh, I don't believe that any of this is real" when it starts happening to him. You know, it makes it so much easier to get across that information.
When Mark Gatiss was contacted by Russell, he really hoped he would get to do the Victorian era episode for obvious reasons I just
He's a
said.
dork. Because he's a big dork.
His original pitch was that the story would take place within a hotel and each floor would contain a fake medium. However, on the top floor, a real medium named Mr. Sneed would believe he's contacting the dead, who are actually aliens. During the writing process, Gatiss became frustrated finding that he was writing... Gatiss was frustrated because he was thinking he was writing something that was too traditional. But I think the traditional really works for this episode because you're easing a new audience into a show and it needs to be kind of traditional before you really go off the rails and kind of start experimenting a little bit.
Yeah, this is episode 3. You know, the first 2 episodes are establishing who the main character is. Episode 2 is what's the premise of the show. Episode 3 is here's just a monster of the week episode. You know, here is what most weeks are going to look like now. You know, and I think this is a really, really solid monster of the week episode. You know, it's nothing earth shattering, nothing changing. It's just like, yep, fun little story, little adventure, off we go. You know.
Yeah, it's really in the halfway point of the show with Dalek, where the show kind of goes, okay, this is where the show is going. This is where the show gets incredible, really. Mark Gatiss found his second draft became too bleak. He wanted the story to be solely about grief, and Russell would remind him that this is Saturday night prime time. When things become too dark, you need to try and make it fun. And I think that's a good premise in general, because as a 16-year-old, I really wanted Doctor Who to be dark and grim and gritty. This was around series 8 when I was like, yeah, make it dark and gritty. But nowadays I'm like, No, it needs to be fun, because dark and gritty doesn't really work in the show's favor.
That's interesting, because when Dark and Gritty started to come around with Capaldi, I was, God, like, what, 13 when Capaldi, what was the year was that? 2013, that Capaldi's first season.
Yeah.
Yeah, so
2014.
2014, so I was 14. And I really didn't want it to be gritty Doctor Who. I was like, fuck it, Doctor Who's fun. Why are you wanting to make it gritty?
Yeah.
It doesn't really work with edgelord Doctor Who, you know? But, you know, they eventually found the sweet spot with Capaldi. And every now and then I do like a bit of darkness in my Doctor Who. I still lean towards, I want it to be a fun sci-fi show with a dark, like a dark sliver every now and then where it can just hit you in the fucking, like, oh my god, that was devastating. But I want it to be a fun adventure, you know?
Yeah, like 80, I would say like a good balance is like 80% fun, 20% dark as a good balance for me. When the BBC published a document for Series 1 in late 2004, they described this episode as being set in Victorian times and featuring the gaseous Gelf. The next day, The Sun published an article about, they called it Dr. Pooh, and referred to the Gelf as passing wind and brainwashing people while they sleep to commit nasty deeds to change the course of history.
Another fantastic article by The Sun. What a great source of journalism.
Yeah, and you know, as you know, we still get articles like this coming out in newspapers. Like, you have to take everything with a grain of salt. Sometimes they're half right. Like when they predicted that Kylie Minogue was going to be in an episode playing a Cyberman. That was half right.
yeah. Sometimes they're half right.
But yeah, that's our research section.
Brilliant.
Want to dive into the episode?
Let us dive in to the Unquiet Dead.
Great God. Spirits from the other side.
The other side of the universe.
Pity us. Pity the Gelf. There is so little time. Help us.
What do you want us to do?
The rift. Take the girl to the rift. Make the bridge.
What for?
We are so very few. The last of our kind. We face extinction.
Why? What happened?
Once we had a physical form like you. But then the war came.
War? What war?
The Time War. The whole universe convulsed. The Time War raged, invisible to smaller species, but devastating to higher forms. Our bodies wasted away. We're trapped in this gaseous state.
So that's why you need the corpses?
We want to stand tall, to feel the sunlight, to live again. We need a physical form, and your dead are abandoned. They go to waste. Give them to us.
But we can't.
Why not?
It's not... I mean, it's not...
Not decent, not polite. It could save their lives.
Open the rift. Let the Gelf through. We're dying. Help us. Pity the Gelf.
The episode begins with me making a huge revelation.
Yes.
And that is that this episode is not called The Unquiet Dead.
Yes.
This episode is called The Unquiet Dead, and I just
I
can't read.
Yes.
The Unquiet Dead.
I thought it was called The Unquiet Dead when I was a kid, and my mum had to be like, no, but it says unquiet.
It's a stupid word. Looks too much like the word unquiet. But it's the Unquiet Dead. Why not?
To be fair, they're also the Unquiet Dead because we're not.
Yeah, they're
dead,
not. They're not really dead.
Actually, they are dead. I guess they are dead.
But they're not quite
they're
dead
just possessed.
because they're possessed. The Unquiet Dead. I don't think it's actually. I don't know if I like it as a title as much as the Unquiet Dead. The Unquiet Dead. Unquiet.
We've said the Unquiet Dead so many
I
times
know.
now, it's just lost all meaning.
Yeah, it really has. But the episode begins at a funeral parlor, which is lovely and really sets the tone as a man is looking over his dead mother or grandmother or something, presumably mother. And he's like, she's dead, you done all the stuff. And then she chokes him. She bursts awake and she's grabbing him, and the guy that the funeral director, whatever his actual job title is,
Mr. Sneed.
Yeah, Mr. Sneed, which is a very Dickens last name, isn't it?
Yeah.
And it's like straight out one of his books. He's like, oh crap, this is happening again, and tries to restrain the dead old woman, but she resists, breaks out of her coffin, like she's got super strength now. She just fucking breaks that thing apart, and we get cut to her walking the streets of Cardiff. A blue ghost lady screaming through the snow. It's a very fun visual to open your episode with.
I remember this visual moment more because of the Battles in Time card. Do you remember Battles in Time?
I had so many Battles in Time cards. It was I had a book, and we had pages and pages and pages of them.
Yeah.
And
They still sell them.
I
want to try and collect a full set someday. That would be fun. But yeah, the character of Mr. Sneed was originally going to be a younger character in the first draft. And Mark Gatiss really wanted a man named David Tennant to play the role of a character. David Tennant, of course, would go on to star in The Nativity 2, one of the best movies ever made. And I can't think
his
of
most
anything.
defining role. Yeah, probably.
Yeah, I can't think. I don't know what else he's been in.
No, not much. He kind of just like blinked and left the limelight again. Yeah.
But yeah, this opening sequence really sets up the tone. It's really well shot. It feels very atmospheric. There's not a second where you don't believe this is in the late 1800s. It feels authentic. Although, apparently on the set, there's multiple light switches. Oh. That's like the only mistake they ever made of this episode. Interesting.
The episode opens up though to another great establishment of what Doctor Who is like. Because this is the opening of the show. We've got to tell you what to expect, and that is the pure chaos inside the TARDIS when it's flying, and how the Doctor really doesn't have a grip on what he's doing. He's saying that he's going to Naples in the 1800s at Christmas time, and Rose has to hold down these levers, and everything's like sparking and shouting, and it's pure chaos on board this ship.
We don't do this a lot these days. Just have pure chaos. Nowadays, it's just like, oh yeah, the
pull a
TARDIS
lever,
just
done.
arrives.
We also
one thing about the TARDIS in this episode, though, reminds me of series 1 as a whole. Like, there's a lot of green lighting for some reason.
Yeah,
it's never really present in other seasons.
Yeah,
I wonder why that is.
Green is just, wherever Christopher Eccleston walks, there's just always a green light on him.
He's turning into the Hulk.
Yeah. But we then get introduced to a very familiar face, yet an unfamiliar character with the like maiden lady that works for the the fucking
Mr. Sneed.
Yeah, Mr. Sneed. The lady that works for Mr. Sneed, who is of course also a member of Torchwood in the modern day.
Gwyneth, Eve Miles, would later go on to play Gwen. Those names are very similar.
But that was on purpose, wasn't it? Because
I'm not 100% sure if it was done on purpose.
I feel like it must have been, because like when Russell T Davies was casting her to play, or Chris Chibnall, whoever was in charge of casting for Torchwood, they must have been like, you've been in the show already, but we can make it work. We'll just call you Gwen and say that you're a distant relative. And then in that fucking finale of Doctor Who, they actually do say that she's just a distant relative of this character. Yeah,
in A Stolen Earth, the Doctor's like, oh yeah, I recognize you. You're related to that lady I met once. That's like a 4-year payoff as well.
Yeah, and across 2 shows,
Yeah. So Eve Miles was originally supposed to be doing a play at the time, but she dropped that for a chance to work with Christopher Eccleston, because Christopher Eccleston is such a lovely actor to work with. Apparently, he's like the best. She also had a lot of respect for the show, and of course, that decision would be like the best decision she would ever make. Like, of course, she would go on to star in Torchwood, and that
not
would
just star in Torchwood, lead Torchwood. She was the main focus of Torchwood.
Oh god, she's so good in Torchwood. Gwyneth's story arc in the original draft would have had her younger brother die and be buried in a cemetery nearby, and he would rise from the grave. I don't like that idea as much. It feels
that's pretty dark. That's pretty dark. Yeah, that's pretty dark.
Leave the dead children for the
Moffat.
empty child.
Yeah. The episode can in this scene anyway, she's basically like, I also know about the dead people that are rising, and I think it's wrong. But we've got to go put a stop to it.
She has a line of something terrible is happening in this house and we have to get help. That's a perfect trailer line.
It is. That is a very good trailer line. I really like her as a character. We'll get into her a bit more, but first we're going back to the TARDIS, where the Doctor is like, "Hey, we're in Naples, landed perfectly, everything's great. If you step outside those doors, you'll just see lovely snow." And Rose is about to go outside, and he's like, "Whoa, you can't go outside dressed like that. You'll cause a riot. You've got to go and get on some 1800s appropriate clothing," which is, I think, the only time that he actually gives a shit. Doctor Who's very inconsistent with whether or not people wear costumes or not in the past, isn't it?
Yeah, and of course he points out where the TARDIS wardrobe is. He would say that exact line, like to the left, take the second left, and then turn right, and then another left, or something like that to effect. He would say that exact same line in Thin Ice, which we covered last week.
He does. Yeah, you're right.
And of course the same era, similar clothing.
I wonder if it is the exact same line, because if it is the exact same line, that is some fucking 10 points to the writers.
Yeah, I believe it is the exact same line, which is really funny.
That is superb. But Rose goes off to get change, and we then cut back to Mr. Sneed and his assistant, as they are also just talking. He's just catching her up on the information, like, the lady killed the man, and now we look for lady. I think the starting of this episode is the slowest paced bit, because once this episode's plot kicks in, then oh my god, it goes a million miles an hour, but it's a real slow build up where it's just kind of making sure you understand that they're in the past, that there's the dead people rising, this is how time travel works in the show. It's making carefully sure that you understand all the rules here.
Yeah, I think it's all natural, though. Like, of course, Rose would be amazed that she's in the past. Like, that would be something
it all fits for
melt
sure.
her brain.
Yeah, all fits for sure. We then get introduced to probably the biggest character for this episode, which is our historical figure, which is, of course, Mr. Charles Dickens, famous for writing A Muppet's Christmas Carol.
Which recently got a director's cut on Disney Plus, apparently, which is
interesting.
Yeah, I think they added a song that originally was cut and then wound up on, like, Laserdisc, and then got cut again, and then now it's back in the movie again.
Great movie. Very good movie.
Yeah, I haven't seen it in so long.
Same.
I might just revisit this. Russell really wanted Simon Callow for the role of Charles Dickens, as he had played the author before in a miniseries called Hans Christian Andersen, My Life as a Fairy Tale.
That's a good title.
And he also developed a one-man show called The Mystery of Charles Dickens. Basically, this man is like Charles Dickens.
Oh, right.
He's basically an expert on Charles Dickens and all that, and he is perfect in this role.
He is very good.
So good.
Yes.
Simon Callow was even considered as the Eighth Doctor at one point, but if he was asked, he would have declined because he did not enjoy sci-fi at the time. Even though he watched the original Doctor Who episode when it first aired, he thought it was very good, but obviously sci-fi just isn't his thing.
Which is just the wrong opinion to have. I can understand why they would finger him to be the Eighth Doctor, though, because obviously the Eighth Doctor is a very Victorian-looking man, and him is a very Victorian-looking man as well, which is why he's modelled his entire life around pretending to be Charles Dickens.
Yeah, Callow only agreed to appear in this episode because of how accurate the character was, because he's low energy and just kind of grumpy in this episode, because that's at this end of his life, he's not energetic anymore. And he was just like, yeah, that's perfect. That's how he was at the end of his life.
Yeah. And this is a very good scene as well, I think, where it's just a quiet conversation with Dickens and this random stagehand who's like, you've got to come up, sir, your time to come up on. And Dickens is just kind of down and miserable and like, fuck, this is what my life has come to. I've got no ideas. I've got no passion. I'm just out here rereading my books I've already read. Like, I have no joy in my life anymore. He also hints that he's like fucked things up with his family, which is probably something true from history that I don't know anything about, but it creates a mini arc for him for the episode, which is a nice little touch.
And it all feels so authentic. Even though I don't know much about Charles Dickens, it just feels so accurate. And I feel like this man is Charles Dickens. And also he appeared in like 2011. Remember the Wedmouth River song where history gets all fucked up?
Yes.
And Charles Dickens is interviewed on BBC Breakfast.
Oh my god, yes. Yes, he does. He does come back. Yeah.
I would love to see him come back. He's so good in this episode.
He is very, very good indeed. We then cut back to the Doctor and Rose, where Rose is finally in her Victorian dress, and we get some semi-uncomfortable flirting between the Doctor and Rose. It's a lot weirder now as an adult when I'm more aware of that Rose is supposed to be 19 than it was when I was a kid, and I was like, they're both grown-ups, I don't give a shit.
Yeah.
You know, like...
Yeah, Rose is 19 and Christopher Eccleston is in his early 40s at this point.
Yeah.
Whereas when David Tennant came along, he was in his 20s, so it feels more appropriate for him and Rose to have that kind of chemistry. I prefer it when they do the reading of the Doctor is Rose's father figure.
Yes.
I think that's even referenced in this episode at one point.
Yeah, the father figure works a lot better, especially with Rose, literally not having a dad, than it does with the stepfather figure, if you catch my drift. But Rose steps out of the TARDIS and into the snow, and I actually really like the shot and the whole mood when she puts her first foot down on the snow and you just hear it crunch, and she's very hesitant about doing it because this is her first time stepping into the past. It really builds up that moment to being a moment,
Yeah, and the soundtrack just builds it as like Marigold's soundtrack. It makes it feel like it's like a fairy tale or something. It just feels so magical. Mm-hmm. It's perfect. It's a perfect soundtrack overall of this entire episode.
It is wonderful. And the Doctor's like, come on then, let's go on, have a lovely time in the past, and they go running off through the snow. So they go running off through the snow. We cut to Dickens as he's preparing he's about to perform his big reading of a book, I guess. He's just out there storytelling. They didn't have cinema. No, they did have cinemas. Did they have cinemas back then? No.
No, not in the 1800s.
Not for a couple more decades. They would have them in the late 1800s, but...
Yeah. But yeah, he's reading A Christmas Carol.
Yeah,
and quick trivia questions. How many ghosts visit Ebenezer Scrooge on the night of A Christmas Carol?
It feels like a trick question because immediately I want to say like 3, but I feel like because you're asking me, it's not 3, and instead I'm going to say 4.
You're correct. It's 4.
Yeah, I'm so smart.
Everybody forgets Jacob Marley, his old business partner.
See, people just, they don't like, why are you asking me the question? Because your instinct is to be like, oh, past, present, future. But nah, it's a trick question.
And then, of course, if you watch Doctor Who, you'd believe that the Doctor visits him, and there's also a giant shark that flies around. If you remember that episode, The Christmas Carol.
That's a good episode. It's a good episode. But the Doctor and Rose are walking through the streets, and this is where the Doctor realizes that he's fucked things up, and they're not in Naples, and they're not in 1860. It's actually 1869. Nice. And they're in Cardiff, which Rose is like, oh, 1869, I don't care. And then when she finds out she's in Cardiff, she's like, oh, fuck it, right, okay. Like, which is just it. I really like the scene because it summarizes how unreliable the TARDIS piloting is. Where the Doctor says we're going is not where we're actually going.
Yeah, and this is the first time in the modern era where it's emphasized, but the Doctor never really knows where he's going, and that was obviously a constant theme throughout the classic series. And of course, this is the perfect time to introduce this theme, because in the very next episode, the Doctor tries to take her back into 2005. I mean, he's like a year late when everybody thinks he kidnapped her, which is like a perfect story.
Yep. The episode continues with Dickens doing his book reading as he's describing the face of one of his ghosts, and he's like, it looked just like that, as he points to the old lady in the crowd who, I guess, the gaseous alien was like, fuck it, I'm going to go see Charles Dickens. This will be a nice day out.
I think in one of the original drafts was that this woman is like a big fan of Charles Dickens and would never miss like an opportunity to see his live readings.
Right.
I think that was lost in this final edit.
It complicates things a bit because why is the alien... reliving her life, you don't even really need to have a reason for her to be...
I think the reason could be that she just follows a large crowd out of curiosity. That would make more sense.
But she makes it in, and everybody starts freaking out when they see the big blue ghost lady, and then she stands up and starts splaying ghosts out her mouth like it's an episode of Ghostbusters.
Mostly it's a decent effect, I would say. Sometimes it looks a bit too cartoony for the show, but
digital effects for season 1 are pretty inconsistent, but this is far from the worst digital effect in season 1. The worst.
It looks pretty solid for the time.
Yeah.
Certainly.
Oh, it looked great at the time. I remember at least as with my 5-year-old brain being like, "Ooh, this looks cool," you know, like, yeah, good TV effect.
Yeah.
So the episode continues with the ghost lady attacking everybody. They all quickly run out of the theater as the doctor and that run in. Dickens is immediately like, the doctor's the reason that this is, the guy that set this up, because this is clearly a hoax, has revealed himself, But the doctor's not really listening and trying to get information. Rose spots that the grave man, whatever, was
Mr. Sneed.
Yeah, Sneed and his lady friend, his maiden person, have taken the old lady's body back now that the gaseous creature has left it, and they're putting it into the back of their cart. She chases them out the building and quickly gets chloroformed by Sneed, which Sneed just has that on him. Is that something that people just kind of hold around in the 1800s?
It is implied. Rose does imply later on that
he cops a feel.
Yeah, which implies he does other things.
Maybe
he has it handy.
Maybe Sneed is a creepy guy. Maybe.
Very, 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 very awkward rape joke.
There is, but let's not worry about that later on, and instead focus on the next very fun scene, which is the doctor chases after Rose and jumps into a cart, but Dickens is following behind, accosting him, and it's like, "You can't go inside this place. This cabin is mine. Get the fuck out." And the doctor's like, "Nah, you get in." Pulls him in, and then we have a really, really, really great scene between the doctor and Charles Dickens, where it's just the doctor fanboying over being next to Charles Dickens and starts talking about his books and explains to him what being a fan even is and criticizes one of his books, and it's a delightful scene to watch. There's a great back and forth.
Yeah, and one of the reasons Mark Gatiss was actually initially reluctant to write in the role of Charles Dickens in this episode, because in the classic series, the Doctor never really met historical figures. He only referenced them in third person. "Oh, I got this quote from so-and-so," or whatever. But here is the first proper time the Doctor meets a historical figure. I can't think of too many in classic Who. I was recently watching A Reign of Terror, and Napoleon makes an appearance in it, but it's only a brief appearance. He walks past Ian and Barbara at one point. He doesn't really interact with the main cast. I can't think of too many instances of the Doctor actually meeting a historical figure and talking to him in this way.
Yeah, it's very interesting. The episode then continues with the Doctor and Charles Dickens approaching the front door of Mr. Sneed and the caretaker after they've realized that it is, in fact, inside the gas of their home, wherever these creatures are. Once they approach the Doctor, once the Doctor and that approaches the door, things start picking up a bit. Rose wakes up from where she's standing at the same time that one of the corpses do. The Doctor and that are chatting. He notices that there's something wrong with the gas and pushes his way inside the building. Everything is moving at 1,000,000 miles an hour, but eventually...
So, in one of the original drafts, sorry for interrupting you, of the original drafts, Gwyneth answers the door and originally thinks it's going to be a caretaker answering for a call of hire, and she thinks it's going to be a woman, and she's like, "Oh, I expected a woman," and the Doctor's like, "Not yet," which is a really interesting line I wish was kept in here, because that would have been amazing.
That would have been a superb line. That would have been just a absolutely fantastic line.
To quote the Ninth Doctor.
yeah, superb. But Rose is getting strangled-ish by one of the dead people when the Doctor finds her, and he just kind of sets a quip, and that makes the dead guy drop his ironclad grip that Rose couldn't break out of. It was weird. I also, I understand that these gas creatures are actually secretly villains, but what was their plan with holding Rose? What were they trying to do? Were they just trying to kill her so that more gas people could get inside the body? And then when the Doctor comes, they're like, "Fuck it, we'll just quickly improv something and tell you to help us so that you instead can do this really convoluted plan with getting us all into the everybody's bodies." What the fuck were they? What were they doing with Rose? What was
I don't know. There's no way to explain this. Really, it's complicated.
Yeah, it's a really complicated plan. This is everything has to work perfectly or it all falls apart. If they didn't capture Rose right now, the plan just wouldn't work. But Rose gets saved by the Doctor, and the gas people disappear, and then we get a very fun scene of everybody in a room talking and explaining to us what is going on, where these gas creatures are coming from. The guy's like, we were told that this house was haunted, you know, and that's why we got it relatively cheap, that there was these monsters living in it, these shadows, you know, going around, which is, of course, the gas creatures. Dickens doesn't believe any of this, ever the skeptic, and goes off looking at one of the corpses to check for, like, wires and shit.
Yeah, after the doctor tells him to shut up.
Like...
And there's also a great moment where Gwyneth hands like the doctor a cup of tea, and she's like, "Here you go, it's your favorite." And the doctor kind of looks at her, knowing that she's kind of telepathic, which is a great little moment.
Yeah, it is, because the doctor is telepathic as well.
And also I believe they mentioned the rift here at some point, which is interesting because that was the whole theme of series 1 and carried on into Torchwood, where everything's coming through the rift. And that left me wondering, when was the rift ever closed? Because it was never closed on television.
I guess maybe they closed it. Maybe the doctor just kind of did it when he was closing the cracks in time. He was like, oh yeah, fuck, I need to do this as well, and just close up that rift. You know.
No, I actually looked this up. Apparently it was destroyed by the ghost of Yanto Jones.
Right.
In like some audio drama somewhere. which is like really weird that Yanto Jones turns into a ghost at some point, but okay.
Yeah, what a wild life Yanto lives. You know, what a wild life.
And also, like, one of the only Doctor Who characters to ever have their own like tourist spot, because Yanto's shrine is still in Cardiff.
Fantastic.
Which is absolutely wild. I want to go there someday.
Yeah, it'd be very, very cool. The scene with the Doctor and Dickens is another very good scene, where it's just basically Dickens pleading with the Doctor, like, I've dedicated my life to showing that these are all frauds. You know, I love magic tricks, I love illusions, but they are illusions, they're not real. And now you're telling me that they are real, and that the thing I've spent my life dedicated to disproving is actually true, and it's made me look a fool. Have I wasted everything? And it's a very, 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 very nice scene.
Yeah, what I love about this episode is that Charles Dickens unconsciously knows that this is near the end of his life. Like, he's speaking as if he knows what's about to happen to him, which is very interesting. Like, it feels very much like, this whole episode feels like what happens to Vincent van Gogh in like 5 years' times. Like, that ending that Charles Dickens gets in this episode is very much like the ending to Van Gogh, which is very interesting.
Yeah, although that's the greatest episode of Doctor Who ever.
Yeah, we still need to cover it someday.
Love that episode so much. The episode continues with some girl talk. Whoa! As we get Rose chatting with Gwyneth about boys. It's a fun little conversation because, you know, you have the 21st century Rose, who's very free sexually, very open and liberal and willing to chat about, you know, boys and fancying people, and the very closed off and more conservative nature of a woman from the 1800s, where, you know, they don't have rights. And you know, it's a fun little conversation where Rose kind of pries out of her that Gwyneth fancies the butcher's boy, and, you know, it humanizes Gwyneth. It gives her some very much needed humanization for what's about to come, you know.
But, you know, Gwyneth not having rights, what's different to nowadays when women's rights are being taken away from them? Oh boy. Yikes, everything's going backwards. But yeah, my first thought of this was obviously the whole Bechdel test thing, where the whole conversation between two women have to be about a boy. I was kind of disappointed at first, because it's like, yeah, yikes.
Yeah.
But at the same time, it works in the episode's favor. It works because it's all about how they are as characters, and I really like it. I really like getting to know. It really helps you get to know Rose a bit better. Gwyneth says Rose has been thinking about her dad more than ever, which makes me think of the Doctor being a father figure more than anything.
Yes,
that line, which is kind of contradictory to what happens elsewhere in this episode, but let's forget about that. There's also a Big Bad Wolf reference, which also comes into play at the end of the season.
Yes, and this is, of course, because Gwyneth is a telepath, and she can kind of read Rose's thoughts, and she ends up looking into the future and kind of freaking out a bit. And this is when the Doctor's like, oh, I knew you were a telepath all along. That's why I've come to get you, because I'm also a telepath kind of sometimes as well, like you are kind of sometimes as well. Anyway, let's have a seance, which is, it's a very fun line of just like a close-up of the Doctor where he's like, I want to have a seance, you know. And then we cut to said seance where Dickens is being a grumpy old grouch, and he's like, oh, I don't want to take part in this. The Doctor quotes Christmas Carol at him, and he sits down and he starts taking part, and the seance scene itself is relatively fun. It's a very heavy dump of exposition, because this is where we first meet the Gelth, which are the gas monsters that have been haunting this episode, and they're like, you know, we've been trapped, there's only a few of us left, ever since the Time War, we've been fucked, any higher species have been fucked, we've been trapped in gaseous form, and all the performances here are so good. I love Rose's little look over to the Doctor when she's at the mention of Time War, you know, the seance scene is wonderful.
Yeah, what I love about this is the Doctor feels guilty, because obviously the whole Time War thing, we initially thought it was just, oh yeah, Daleks versus Time Lords. That was all concerned, but the idea of it's a ripple effect, it spreads across the galaxy, but the whole war has effect on other creatures. It makes the Doctor feel guilty, which is a really good character trait to have in this episode.
Yes.
And he doesn't, what's good about this episode is it's not overly obvious in the text. Like, there's no point where the Doctor's like, I caused this.
Yes, you just see it on his face. Yeah, you just see the look of guilt on his face, which is wonderful.
What I love is that there's a kind of conflict between the Doctor and Rose, where Rose is like, yeah, but they can't just inhabit dead people. We have to respect the dead.
Yes.
And basically, she's kind of racist, because they kind of compare these ghosts to like foreigners later on, which is interesting, because the end of the episode kind of says, oh yeah, but Rose is right to be racist almost. I'm joking.
You know, you could maybe twist it to be that way, but really I think what Rose is saying is that donating your organs is wrong. That's her standpoint, is that you shouldn't be able to, if you're dead or whatever, you should just be buried, and none of your parts should be used to help somebody else, because that's disgusting and wrong and bad, and that's what this episode really is teaching us, and is proven right by the end.
Yeah, I don't think either of those points are intended for the episode, but apparently, like, after this episode aired, there was a Guardian article basically saying this episode was racist, it didn't respect foreigners and all that, but people had to be like, no, that's not the intended message. I think you're overreaching a little bit.
Yeah, I think you really have to twist certain aspects of it to make it to be like that. You have to really paint it the entire episode in a certain light.
Yeah, but when I watched this episode, I was like, yeah, Rose is right near the end of the episode. Her initial thought of this race is correct, which is interesting.
Rose is right, but I don't think her means of being right is what the episode's getting. Like, her justification that it's just wrong is what the Doctor is telling her. No, that is not, you know, we can't do something just because it would be wrong on Earth to fill this body full of a gas alien. You know, this is a whole species that we have to protect and we have to save. He literally says, he's like, you know, there's different morals out here, which is really good. She just happens to be right because this is secretly an evil gas alien. But like, maybe it wasn't. Maybe it wasn't, Rose. What then? What if it's a good gas alien?
This reminds me of that Sarah Jane Adventures episode we covered quite recently, The Death of the Doctor, where these vulture creatures come into Earth and they're like, oh yeah, the Doctor's dead, you can come along to the funeral. And Sarah Jane the entire time is like, this is a trap, the Doctor can't be dead. And everybody else around her is like, you can't judge these aliens based upon just their looks. And it turns out Sarah Jane is right.
Yeah, no, you definitely could.
This whole subplot of the Gelth taking control of the dead bodies was partially inspired by Mark Gatiss' third Doctor novel, The Last of the Gadarene, which also
the last of the Mark Gatisses,
which also features an alien race losing their physical form to flee from their home world, which is interesting. But he just reused this idea.
Yeah, but I mean, you know, sometimes it's easier.
And also nobody knows.
Nobody will have read the book.
Doctor
Plus,
novel.
if you're working on a deadline and you want with a story that is proven to work, you know.
But what I like about the conflict between the Doctor and Rose also is that there's a conflict. Whereas in the classic series, the companion would just go along with whatever the Doctor wanted to do, basically, and there's no pushback to any idea of like moral compasses or anything like that. And I really like this episode just for introducing, Rose is a character of her own. She's
a
strong,
contrarian.
independent.
Yes, she will fight for her beliefs, and she will have an argument with the Doctor about them.
You know, when she got kidnapped earlier on and knocked out, she doesn't spend 2 episodes in a row just trying to escape. She gets out of that predicament just very quickly.
She does indeed. The episode continues with everybody going down to the morgue to help out the blue gas people that should definitely be trusted and just taking out their word at what they say. So they all head down and to where the rift is, and they're like, Gwyneth, come stand on the rift and then everything will be pretty fucking cool. And so she's like, that sounds pretty chill. I'm going to do that. This is line by line dialogue, by the way.
Actually, before that, Rose is like, hold on a second. The Gelf can't take control of these corpses because in 2005 corpses weren't walking around and all that, and the Doctor's like, oh yeah, basically everything's in flux. History can be rewritten apparently, even though the first Doctor says the exact opposite. But the original outline by Russell T Davies would have had the Doctor to travel to 2005, showing that the future would have indeed changed into a barren wilderness. Apparently Mark Gatiss didn't want this in his script because he felt like it would have removed the tension in the narrative if Rose and the Doctor jumped in the TARDIS and went elsewhere for a bit.
Suddenly it becomes about saving the future rather than, stopping the Gelth immediately and saving everybody around them.
And then also it would have increased the budget significantly if they changed the set for like 5 minutes. Like if they walked out of that house. For like
no reason. Hang on what you're doing, Gelth. I will be right back. Rose, come with me. Yeah, it would ruin the pacing as well. That'd be so weird.
Yeah.
Gwyneth steps on to the rift, and immediately a giant blue person comes up from behind her, and they're like,
from Avatar.
Yeah, a giant blue person from Avatar comes up behind you and is like, hey, we're the Gelf. We're going to go possess all the dead bodies now, and also some of the living ones. Ha ha ha. We're going to kill you and take over your bodies. And they're like, but you said there was only a few. Yeah, a few billion. Got him.
And the Doctor's like, hey, wait a minute, but I pitied you. Yeah. But also, he only pitied them because every sentence they said ended with, we are the Gelf, pity us. They say pity us like 10 times. You can't trust people who keep on telling you to pity them.
Yeah. But they end up getting cornered by a heap of dead people. Mr. Sneed gets his neck snapped and then gets possessed by one of the ghosts. Dickens freaks out and runs out the building, and for whatever reason, the Gelth just are like, fuck it, we don't give a shit about him. And they just...
Because they can't catch up to them because they're very slow.
Sure, yeah. They're not like super speedy gas people. Like,
well, the zombies can't catch up to them.
Yeah, the gas people could freak him out and then just wait for the zombies to catch up. You know?
But the gas people, they can't do anything. So it's not like but they do catch up with them eventually. Like, they go through the doorway, so it's not like they don't get them.
Yeah. But the whole time Rose is freaking out like, well, I can't die, and the Doctor's like, I just fucking explained to you that yes you can, because anything can happen in the past, anything including your death, Rose.
Has she never seen like Back to the Future or something like death? You can still die in the past even though you weren't born. Like, you're not born yet, so therefore if you think you couldn't die in the past, therefore you can't exist right then in the past either. Like, you'd be like, you know what I mean?
Yeah, I understand what you're saying.
The whole theory of time travel is just like, you can exist in the past. It's fine. Don't worry about it.
But we cut to Dickens, who's running outside, and he notices one of the gas creatures have a tough time in the air and go back into the vents. And then he's like, of course, the gas. And he turns around, runs back inside, now full of bravery, and starts opening the valves on all the gas lights and tells the Doctor that, the gas is going to pull them out of their bodies. Hopefully, I hope that I'm right in this situation, he says.
Yeah. I find it interesting that the third ever episode basically ends with the Doctor not being able to save the day, but Charles Dickens has to instead save the day.
Yeah, the Doctor's pretty much like, I'm dead now. Like,
if he didn't pick up Charles Dickens in his travels, he'd be dead.
Yeah. One idiot the Doctor is. But the Doctor helps release even more gas because he's eating a lot of beans, and
Interesting. You say that, but the next episode features the Slovene.
Yeah.
So.
But all the Gelth get ejected from the bodies because of the gas, and the Doctor starts chatting with Gwyneth again, who's back. And she's like, I can't send them back through the rift, but I can blow them all up with these matches that I keep on me. Don't worry about it. Just for, and the Doctor's like, I can't let you kill yourself. I'll do it. You guys leave. At this point, Rose and Charles Dickens have left the building. And this is where the Doctor discovers that Gwyneth is actually already dead. She died the second she stepped onto the rift. And this is just like, I guess she's still alive and talking because like the remnants of her from the Gelth or something. I don't really understand how she's chatting if she's dead, but like don't.
She has supernatural powers. You can just say, she's a ghost for a bit.
I guess ghosts are canon now. But she blows herself up and takes out the ghosts. I guess you could blow up ghosts. Can you blow up ghosts? Is that how that works? Could you just blow up a ghost? I mean, oh my god, there's a ghost. Get my bazooka. Like,
if they're made of gas, you can cause them to explode because they're gas.
Yeah, but would that stop them then existing? Couldn't they just reform? Because once the explosion's gone, there's still gas.
That's a good point. Yeah, I don't know. Don't think about it.
Yeah, it's just like you can blow up ghosts. We're discovering new things about ghosts. They're weak to explosions. It's going to really change ghost hunters. But we then get to the end of the episode. You're right, they really do wrap up the evil ghost storyline super quick, within a few minutes. But they get to the end of the episode where they're chatting with Charles Dickens, and he's like, oh, you've opened my eyes, Doctor. I've thought of an ending for my unfinished book. There were aliens all along, which is a great twist and definitely not a shit one like it was all a dream. Where the solution is, it was just aliens did it. So
but what I like the entire time Charles Dickens is talking, the Doctor's like, oh shit, he's gonna die soon. It's like super depressing just watching the Doctor watch him.
Be all energized and revigorated.
He's got a new sense of life, and the Doctor's like, it's like the end of Vincent and the Doctor. It's the exact same situation. It's really sad.
It is very sad, but it's a nice little ending to the episode with the Doctor traveling away in the TARDIS, blowing Dickens's mind yet again, and ends with him.
I also like the little bit of emotional beat where it's like, Gwyneth died to save the world, but nobody will remember
her. Yeah,
tragic. It's super tragic, and it's also adding a little bit more emotion than Doctor Who would have had in the classic series.
Yeah,
like you would have never had that like a little character arc with Gwyneth and Rose in the classic series either. It's just really nice to see.
Though I tell you, blowing up ghosts is a real classic series move. That's where
we need to cover Ghostlight someday. I haven't seen that episode in so long. I don't understand it. Nobody understands Ghostlight.
Right.
It's a really fucking weird haunted house episode.
Interesting.
It's a Sylvester McCoy 3-parter, so we could cover it in one episode.
That sounds fun. But the episode ends with Dickens with his new sense of life and energy walking down the street, quoting Christmas Carol again, where he's Merry Christmas, everyone, or whatever the line is. I don't remember what Kermit the Frog said. It wasn't Kermit that said that line.
It was Kermit's son, Tiny Tim. But also, the Doctor and Rose are in their TARDIS, and we're talking about, Charles Dickens is going to die soon and all that.
Yeah.
The whole TARDIS is lit really weird.
It's shot weird. Like maybe this was just a quick pickup at the end of the day where they were like, "Fuck, we need to grab this scene. We don't have enough time. Like we're running out."
It just looks like they just ran out of time to set up the lighting properly because it just looks really flat and just not like the TARDIS we know. It looks like it's like I can't explain it. It's like it's just a backdrop for some reason. It's like they just filmed it in front of green screen.
It's
really weird.
It's a weird one for sure, but whatever. It's a short fucking 15 seconds. But that does bring us to the end of the Unquiet Dead that are ghosts from Alien Planet, which I think was the original title. What did you think of this episode, Scott, looking back at it?
The Forgotten Christmas episode, it's really solid, I would say. It's a really solid episode. from series 1. I really like it a lot.
Yeah, I really like it a lot as well. I think as far as episode 3 of season 1, I don't know if you could ask for a better third episode of a season. It is solid, it's fun, it's really, really quickly paced. Like, this episode does not sit around, it flies by. It does not drag at any minute. All the interactions are fun, it's got humor, heart, everything you really want from an episode. It's a blast of a time. A blast!
Because it ends with a big blast.
Yeah, because of all the farting. But, Scott, that brings us to the end of this episode. What have we got coming up next week?
Next week, we're still keeping up the Christmas theme with... Also, I'm just playing this episode on Beeb's iPlayer, and I just saw the Next Time trailer. I forgot that Toshiko from Torchwood is in the next episode. So that's 2 episodes in a row with Torchwood stars. It's really funny. But next week, we're doing The End of Time Part 1. Which should be interesting. I haven't seen this episode in so long. It's been a long time.
It has been maybe 3 or 4 years for me since I saw this episode. So.
Oh, it's been a proper decade for me.
Oh, wow.
I'm very interested to see if it holds up.
I remember really loving it, but we will see. But yes, it is The End of Time Part 1 next week. In the meantime, leave us a review, rate us 5 stars on whatever podcast app you choose, share us with your friends, email us at whowatcheswhopod@gmail.com, and we will read it out at the end of the month in our news roundup podcast. You can follow us on Twitter at WatchesDoctor. You can find us on Facebook at Who Watches Who, on YouTube at Who Watches Who, where the podcast is available in video form. It is available in audio form wherever you listen to podcasts. If you're watching this on YouTube, there's a shit ton of links in the description. Make use of them. I don't put them there for no fucking reason. I think you said you can follow me on Twitter, Cloth223. The other shit, I don't know what else to say. I'm just gonna end the episode. Bye.
Bye.